The stars glimmered like cold diamonds against the endless black of space. Captain J1 Park leaned forward in the observation deck of the Centauri Exploration Fleet's flagship, his eyes fixed on the rocky landscape of Epsilon 9. Something felt different about this mission. Epsilon 9 wasn't just another mining planet. It was a dangerous world where 3 different alien civilizations had been fighting for resources. Volcanic plains stretched across its surface, broken by deep canyons and fields of sharp metallic rocks. The planet looked like a nightmare, jagged, unpredictable, and unforgiving. The distress signal had come 3 standard days ago. A research team was trapped in Sector 7, a region known for its extreme conditions and constant geological shifts. Most rescue missions would have been impossible, but not this one. J1 checked his communication panel. The Galactic Confederation's standard protocol demanded a complex rescue operation. Multiple ships, extensive equipment, detailed battle plans. But the humans had other ideas. When the first human transport arrived, J1 expected to see a massive vessel packed with soldiers in high-tech combat gear. Instead, a small, unremarkable shuttle dropped into the planet's atmosphere. No warning, no flashy entrance. It was almost like the ship itself wanted to be ignored. The shuttle landed quietly about 2 kilometers from the research team's last known location. No external lights, no emergency signals, nothing that would attract attention. Then they came out. J1 watched through the long-range scanners, his breath catching in his throat. There were 5 of them. But they didn't look like soldiers. They looked like workers, ordinary people wearing what seemed to be standard work clothes. One carried a simple backpack. Another had what looked like a basic repair kit. Their movements were calm, controlled. Most alien rescue teams would have arrived with massive walkers, powered exoskeletons, and enough firepower to destroy a small city. These humans moved like they were taking the casual walk in a park. The volcanic landscape of Epsilon 9 was treacherous. Rocks shifted without warning. Toxic gas pockets could explode at any moment. The temperature fluctuated between freezing and boiling in minutes. Any standard rescue team would need specialized equipment just to survive. But these humans, they seemed to blend into the environment. J1 zoomed in with the ship's advanced scanners. He expected to see some kind of advanced camouflage or stealth technology. Instead, he saw something more incredible. The humans were changing how they moved based on the terrain. When sharp rocks appeared, they shifted their weight differently. When a toxic gas pocket started to form, they adjusted their breathing and movement without any visible communication. It was like watching water flow around obstacles. 2 hours passed. Most rescue missions would have called for backup by now, would have reported challenges, would have requested additional resources. These humans said nothing. Then suddenly, they emerged from the volcanic canyons. 5 people. And with them, the entire research team. 12 scientists who everyone had believed were lost forever. No firefight, no dramatic rescue. They simply walked out. J1's communication panel blinked. A simple message came through from the human team leader. Rescue complete. Team safe. Returning to base. That was it. No details. No explanation. As the shuttle lifted off, J1 realized something fundamental had changed. The universe had just discovered that humans played by entirely different rules. And nobody, absolutely nobody, understood how they did it. This was more than a rescue mission. This was a message, a warning, a demonstration of something entirely new. Dr. Sung-Ho Lee stood in his research lab, surrounded by the most advanced technology the Galactic Confederation had ever produced. Holographic displays danced around him, showing complex data streams from 1,000 different worlds. But today, he was obsessed with something different, something that didn't make sense. Humans. His research table was covered with reports, analysis documents, and fragments of intercepted communications. Most scientists would have been frustrated. Sung-Ho was excited. Every other species in the galaxy approached military and special operations the same way. Build the biggest shield. Create the most powerful weapon. Design the most complex uniform. Protection through technology was the universal rule. Humans broke every single rule. He pulled up a holographic display of typical alien special forces uniforms. The Zarkonian combat suit could withstand temperatures from absolute zero to the surface of a star. The Krek's defensive gear could block radiation that would kill most species in seconds. Each uniform was a marvel of engineering, costing billions of credits and taking years to develop. And then there were the humans. Sung Ho zoomed in on the images from the Epsilon 9 rescue. The human operatives wore what looked like basic work clothes. No visible protection. No energy shields. No advanced communication systems. But they survived. They succeeded. Every single time. A communication came through. It was from Hai Jin Kim, marked top secret. Sung Ho read it carefully. The humans are telling us something, the message said. And we're not listening. He started digging deeper. He looked at mission reports from the last decade. Humans didn't invest in fancy uniforms. They invested in something else entirely. Training, knowledge, adaptation. In one report, a human team survived for 3 weeks in an environment that would have killed most species in 3 hours. They didn't have special suits. They had understanding. They learned how to move, how to breathe, how to survive. Another report showed a human operative who spoke 7 local languages during a single mission. No translation device, no electronic help, just pure human capability. Sung Ho remembered an old saying from his grandmother. The best weapon is the one inside your head. Humans seem to have taken this to a whole new level. He pulled up a classified document about human special forces training. Most military programs focused on physical strength, weapon skills, technology. The human program was different. They trained their people to think, to adapt, to understand. One training manual caught his eye. It wasn't about how to fight. It was about how to listen, how to observe, how to become part of the environment. The best uniform, one section read, is the ability to become invisible without technology. Sung Ho laughed. It sounded crazy, but the mission reports proved it worked. He thought about all the technology around him. Shields that could stop energy blasts, suits that could survive extreme conditions, communication systems that could connect across galaxies. And then he thought about the humans, who needed none of that. A new message blinked on his screen. Another mission report, this time from a diplomatic zone where 3 civilizations had been fighting for generations. The humans went in. No weapons, no special gear. 2 weeks later, peace talks were happening. Sung Ho realized something important. Technology wasn't about the most advanced gear. It was about understanding, about connection. The humans weren't just changing how warfare worked. They were changing how communication worked. And nobody was ready for it. The Galactic Confederation Council chamber was usually a place of tension. Today, it was something worse. Confusion. Ambassador Sung Min Lee stood at the center of the massive circular room. Holographic displays surrounded him, showing mission reports from every corner of known space. Reports about humans that made no sense. How do we defend against an enemy that doesn't look like an enemy? He asked. The council members looked at each other. No one had an answer. For thousands of years, military strategy had been simple. Build bigger weapons. Create stronger shields. Have more soldiers. The side with the most technology usually won. Humans changed everything. Report after report showed the same pattern. Humans solved problems before they became problems. They turned enemies into partners. They resolved conflicts that had burned for generations. In the Orion cluster, 3 civilizations had been fighting for centuries. Countless peace talks had failed. Massive military campaigns had achieved nothing. The humans sent a team of 4. 2 weeks later, those civilizations were talking, not fighting. talking. Another report came from the mining worlds of Proxima. Two corporate groups had been in a deadly conflict for decades. Billions had been spent on weapons, on legal battles, on destruction. The humans arrived. No weapons, no big ships, just understanding. The conflict ended in days. Military analysts from different species tried to understand. They pulled apart every human mission, studied every detail, looked for a secret weapon, a hidden technology. They found nothing. They don't have a strategy, one Zarkonian military expert said. They have an approach. The approach was simple but impossible to fight. Humans didn't see enemies. They saw people with problems. They didn't try to win. They tried to solve. A classified report showed a human team that went into a region with 5 different species fighting. Complex cultural misunderstandings, deep historical conflicts, the kind of problem that usually took decades to solve. They resulted in 3 weeks. Not through force, not through technology, through conversation, through understanding. The council members reviewed the data. They were some of the most intelligent beings in the galaxy, the best military minds, the most advanced strategists. And they were completely lost. How do you fight someone who doesn't want to fight? How do you defend against an enemy that doesn't see you as an enemy? One report stood out. A human team had gone into a conflict zone where 3 different species had been killing each other for generations. No one remembered why the fighting started. The humans didn't bring weapons. They brought stories. They'd brought understanding. They made the fighting groups see each other as people, not as enemies. The Galactic Confederation had spent billions on weapons, on technology, on ways to separate people. Humans spent their resources on ways to connect people. Ambassador Sung Min looked at the council. "We are facing something new," he said, "and we are not ready." The holographic displays continue to show mission reports, each one more impossible than the last. The galaxy was changing, and the humans were leading the change. Not with weapons, but with understanding. Intelligence Officer Hai-Jin Kim loved puzzles, but the humans were becoming her most complicated puzzle yet. Her office in the Galactic Confederation's Central Intelligence Hub was covered with holographic screens. Each screen displayed a different report, a different story about human operations. Some reports seemed impossible. Others were downright crazy. She took a long drink of her cooling tea and zoomed in on a report from the Rigel sector. A small human team had been sent to a research station orbiting a dangerous neutron star. The station had been under attack by pirates for 3 standard weeks. Multiple alien rescue attempts had failed. The human response: 3 people. No big ships. No massive weapons. Within 12 hours, the station was free. All researchers were safe. The pirate fleet was completely disabled, not destroyed, just neutralized. No lives lost on either side. Hai-Jin leaned back in her chair. Something was happening. Something big. She began collecting more reports. Each one added another piece to the strange puzzle of human special forces. In the Orion cluster, a human team of 2 had stopped a civil war that had been burning for decades. On the frozen moons of Proxima, a single human operative had negotiated a peace treaty between 2 warring mining corporations. No uniforms, no standard equipment, just people. Her colleague, Dr. Sungho, walked into the office. He carried a data pad that looked like it might break from the information overload. "Have you seen the latest reports?" he asked, his voice a mix of excitement and confusion. Hai-Jin nodded. "They're getting stranger by the day." The reports were becoming a legend among intelligence circles. Whispers spread through communication networks like wildfire. Some said human special forces had technology so advanced it made them invisible. Others claimed they could change their appearance at will. But Hai-Jin knew better. This wasn't about technology. This was about something deeper. She pulled up a classified video from the Epsilon 9 rescue. The human team moved like they were part of the planet itself. No fancy equipment. No high-tech gear. just pure skill and understanding. Another report caught her eye. A diplomatic mission to a planet with extreme environmental conditions. Most alien diplomats would have arrived in protective suits with entire teams of specialists. The humans, they showed up in what looked like normal clothing, speaking the local language perfectly, understanding cultural nuances that would have taken others years to learn. Dr. Sung-ho pointed at a particular section of the report. Look at this. They didn't just communicate. They connected. The diplomatic mission had resolved centuries-old conflicts in less than a week. Not through force. Not through technology. Through understanding. Hai-Jin's communication panel blinked. A new report was coming in. This one was different, marked with the highest level of classification. She opened it carefully. The report was from a border region where 3 different alien civilizations had been fighting for generations. A human team of 4 had gone in. No weapons visible, no backup called. Just 4 people who seemed to understand something the others didn't. 2 weeks later, the fighting had stopped. Completely. This doesn't make sense, Dr. Sung-ho muttered. But to Hai-Jin, it was starting to make perfect sense. The humans weren't using a special uniform or advanced technology. They were using something far more powerful. They were using their minds. As the holographic screens continued to display their mysterious operations, Hai-Jin realized one thing. The galaxy was about to change, and nobody saw it coming. The observation team from the Galactic Confederation had one job: watch the humans, understand them. But after 3 months of tracking the Human Special Forces unit, they were more confused than ever. Commander Ta Min Kang adjusted the long-range scanners. His team had followed the human operatives through 3 completely different planetary environments. An Arctic tundra, a dense jungle network, a complex urban landscape, and not once had they seen anything resembling a standard military uniform. The first location was Frost 9, a planet so cold that most species needed full-body protective gear just to survive for an hour. The human team arrived wearing what looked like local worker clothing. Thick jackets, simple boots, nothing special. But they moved like they were born on the planet. Ta Min watched the recordings again. The humans didn't fight the environment. They became part of it. When the wind picked up, they changed how they walked. When ice formed on rocks, they adjusted their steps without hesitation. No external communication. No obvious technology. Just pure survival skill. Then came the jungle world of Verdi 12, a planet so dense with vegetation that most mapping systems failed. Alien reconnaissance teams needed massive clearing equipment and weeks of preparation. The humans, they arrived with basic backpacks. Looked like they could have been researchers or tourists. Definitely not a special forces team. Within 3 days, they completed a mission that had stopped 3 different alien military units. They moved through the jungle like shadows, understanding every sound, every movement, every potential threat. The urban mission was even more bizarre. The city was on a planet with 5 different intelligent species living together. Complex social rules, dangerous political tensions. Most diplomatic teams would arrive with massive security details, protective gear, translation equipment. The human team looked like local workers. One wore a delivery uniform. Another looked like a maintenance worker. The third dressed like a junior office employee. No weapons visible. No obvious protection. Ta Min's team tracked their movements carefully. The humans didn't avoid conflict. They prevented it before it could start. A potential fight in a market, diffused with a simple conversation, a brewing political argument, resolved through understanding, not force. The communication logs were even more interesting. The humans switched languages like most people changed shirts. One moment speaking the local trade language. Next moment, perfectly mimicking local dialects. No electronic translation. Pure human skill. During the urban mission, they uncovered a complex smuggling network that had been operating for decades. Not through violence, not through advanced technology, through careful observation and understanding. Min remembered the initial briefing. Every alien civilization believed in overwhelming technological superiority. Massive weapons, complex defense systems, the biggest shield, the most powerful gun. Humans did something different. They became invisible by being visible. They disappeared by blending in. They solved problems by understanding them. The final report from the mission was simple. Just a few lines. Mission complete. No casualties. Objectives achieved. No details. No explanations. As Min reviewed the final recordings, he realized something profound. The humans weren't just doing missions. They were rewriting how missions were done. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The universe is big, complicated, full of stories. But sometimes, the biggest stories are the simplest ones. Captain J1 Park sat in the observation deck, looking at the stars. So much had changed, and yet, everything remained the same. Humans had rewritten how the galaxy worked. Not with big weapons, not with fancy technology, with something much simpler. Understanding. The reports kept coming. Mission after mission, each one more impossible than the last. Conflicts resolved. Enemies turned into friends. Whole civilizations learning to talk instead of fight. No one knew what a human special forces uniform looked like, because they didn't wear one. Their uniform was something you couldn't see, something you felt. In the Proxima colonies, humans had turned a 100-year conflict into a partnership. On the mining worlds of Verdi, they had helped competing groups find common ground. The Orion cluster piece was just the beginning. Dr. Hai-Jin Kim's research had become legendary. Her reports showed something simple but powerful. Humans didn't see borders. They didn't see enemies. They saw people with stories. Dr. Sung-Ho Lee's technological studies proved what everyone was starting to understand. The best technology wasn't something you could touch. It was something you could feel. Understanding. Empathy. Connection. The galaxy had spent thousands of years building bigger weapons, stronger shields, more complex communication systems. Humans did something different. They built bridges. Not metal bridges. Not technological bridges. Human bridges. Bridges made of words. Of listening. Of truly seeing another person. Commander Ta Min Kang's observation reports showed something remarkable. Humans could go anywhere. Become anything. Not through disguise. Not through technology. Through understanding. Major Jin Ho Kwak's training reports revealed the secret. Human special forces weren't trained to fight. They were trained to solve problems. To see the human, or alien, behind every conflict. Ambassador Sung Min Lee had changed how diplomatic missions worked. No more long speeches. No more formal meetings. Just honest conversations. The humans had shown the galaxy something important. Strength wasn't about how many weapons you had. Strength was about how well you could listen. Power wasn't about destroying your enemy. Power was about understanding your enemy. And slowly, the galaxy was changing. Civilizations that had fought for generations were talking. Groups that had been enemies were finding common ground. Conflicts that seemed impossible were being solved. Not through force. Not through technology. Through understanding. Captain J1 Park smiled. The stars seemed different now. Brighter. More connected. The universe was learning a new language. A language without words. A language of understanding. No one knew what a human special forces uniform looked like, because their real uniform was something you couldn't see. It was something you could only feel. Hope. Connection. Understanding. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Orion cluster was about to explode. Not with weapons, not with technology, but with centuries of built-up anger, misunderstanding, and pain. 3 civilizations balanced on the edge of total war. The Krell, the Voxian Confederacy, the Meridian Alliance. Each had enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. Each had generations of conflict burned into their history. Most would have called in massive military forces, prepared for the biggest war the galaxy had ever seen. The humans sent 4 people. Captain Lisa Rodriguez arrived first. She didn't look like a diplomat. She looked like someone who could work in any of these civilizations. No fancy uniform, no special gear, just a simple bag and eyes that seemed to see everything. Her team was just as ordinary. Marco Chen looked like a local trader. Elena Perez could have been a researcher. David Kim seemed like he could fit into any job in any society. They didn't arrive with weapons. They arrived with something more powerful, a willingness to listen. The first meeting was a disaster. Representatives from the 3 civilizations barely looked at each other. Centuries of hate filled the room. Old wounds, old stories, ancient pain. Most diplomats would have tried to argue, to prove a point, to win. The human team did something different. They listened. Captain Rodriguez didn't speak for hours. She just watched. She looked at each representative, not with judgment, with understanding. When the Krell representative started shouting about historical injustices, she didn't interrupt. She let him speak, completely. When the Voxian leader broke down describing losses from past conflicts, she didn't try to comfort. She listened. The Meridian representative expected a typical diplomatic meeting. Speeches, arguments, positions. Instead, they got something else. A conversation. Not about winning, about understanding. The humans brought something unexpected. Personal stories from each civilization. Not big political stories. Small stories. Human stories. Stories that showed the pain, the hope, the dreams of each group. They showed how similar these supposedly different civilizations were. By the 3rd day, something impossible happened. Representatives who had hated each other for generations started to see each other differently. By the end of the week, they were talking about cooperation. Not because someone forced them, not because of weapons or threats, because they finally understood each other. The human team didn't solve the conflict with technology. They solved it with something more powerful. Empathy, understanding, connection. On the final day, the representatives from 3 civilizations did something that had never happened before. They signed a peace agreement. Not a treaty, not a legal document, a promise to understand each other. Captain Rodriguez and her team didn't celebrate. They didn't take credit. They simply prepared to leave. Our job is not to solve problems, she told her team. Our job is to help people see they can solve their own problems. The Orion cluster had been moments away from total war. Now it was moments away from total peace. And nobody saw it coming. The training facility looked ordinary. Too ordinary. Major Jin Ho Kwok stood at the observation window, watching something that made no sense to most of the galaxy. This wasn't a military base. It looked more like a school, a community center, a place where people learned, not where soldiers were made. Classified documents had fallen into his hands, documents that explained everything and nothing. The human special forces training was nothing like any military program in the galaxy. No massive weapon displays, no complex technology demonstrations, just people learning. In one room, trainees studied language, not just words, not just grammar, but culture, history, the way people thought, why they believed what they believed. A young trainee was learning 3 different languages simultaneously, not through a computer, not through an implant, through conversation, through understanding. Another room focused on conflict resolution, not how to fight, how to prevent fighting. Trainees practiced listening, really listening, understanding the root of problems instead of just seeing the surface. Jin Ho watched as they simulated complex social scenarios. A group of trainees worked through a problem where 2 communities had different views. The goal wasn't to win. The goal was to understand. The training manual he'd recovered was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Most military manuals talked about weapons, strategies, how to defeat an enemy. This manual talked about something else entirely. Your primary weapon is your mind. One section read. Your secondary weapon is your ability to understand. Your ultimate goal is not victory. It is resolution. In one training area, recruits learned survival skills, but not survival through technology. Survival through adaptation. They practiced moving through different environments, learning how local people survived, how they lived, how they thought. A trainer spoke to a group of recruits. "You are not here to be stronger than anyone," the instructor said. "You are here to understand more than anyone." Jin-Ho watched a demonstration that broke every military rule he knew. Trainees were learning how to de-escalate conflicts, how to speak softly, how to find common ground. They studied psychology deeper than most dedicated researchers. They learned about human behavior, about alien behaviors, about the tiny details that could start or stop a conflict. One training module focused entirely on empathy, how to truly put yourself in another person's perspective, not just understand their words, but understand their experiences, their fears, their hopes. The physical training was different too, not about building the strongest body, about building the most adaptable body. Trainees learned multiple fighting styles, but they also learned when not to fight. A section in the training manual caught Jin-Ho's eye. A mission is not successful because you defeated an enemy. A mission is successful when you no longer have an enemy. This wasn't a military training facility. This was a school of understanding. The final test wasn't about how many targets you could hit. It was about how many conflicts you could resolve without lifting a weapon. Jin-Ho realized something profound. The humans weren't training soldiers. They were training problem solvers. They were training diplomats. They were training people who could change the entire way the galaxy thought about conflict. And nobody saw it coming. The interview room was quiet, too quiet. Dr. Yun-Soo Park sat across from a survivor. Not a soldier, not a fighter, just someone who had encountered a human special forces team during what was supposed to be a simple planetary conflict. The survivor's hand shook, not from physical injury, from something deeper. "Tell me everything," Yun-Soo said softly. The story came out in pieces, broken, confused. It was supposed to be a standard territorial dispute on the mining colony of Proxima 7. Two competing corporate groups had been fighting for years. Weapons, money, territory. The usual story. Then the humans arrived. They weren't soldiers, the survivor whispered. They were like ghosts. Yun-Soo leaned forward. Every interview was a puzzle, and this one was more complicated than most. The survivor explained how the human team didn't come with weapons. They didn't come with big ships or loud technology. They came with something more powerful. Understanding. One human spoke the local language perfectly, not just the words, the meaning behind the words. Another seemed to know the history of the conflict better than the local people themselves. They didn't fight. They listened. In most conflicts, alien species came with two options: fight or negotiate. Humans did something different. They created a third option nobody saw coming. They made the two fighting groups see each other as people. The survivor described how the humans brought leaders from both sides together, not in a formal meeting, in a small room, with simple chairs, no fancy technology, no recording devices, just conversation. They asked questions, simple questions, deep questions, questions that made people think about why they were fighting in the first place. Who loses when you fight? One human had asked. The answer was obvious: everyone. By the end of 2 weeks, the conflict that had burned for decades was over. No shots fired, no massive military intervention, just human understanding. Yun-Soo made notes. This wasn't just a mission report. This was something else. Psychological warfare, but not the kind anyone expected. Most military teams tried to break the enemy. Humans tried to understand them. Another report crossed her desk. A different conflict, different planet, same approach. On a frozen mining world, A human team stopped a potential massacre by understanding the cultural misunderstanding that had caused the conflict. They didn't use weapons. They used stories. They used empathy. One local leader later said something that became a whisper across multiple star systems. The humans didn't come to win. They came to help us understand. Yun Su realized something important. Technology could destroy. Weapons could kill. But understanding, that could change everything. The survivors she interviewed all said the same thing. The humans were different. They didn't see enemies. They saw people. One survivor's quote stood out. It was simple, powerful. They made us see ourselves differently. That was their real weapon. Not a gun, not a shield, not a fancy uniform. The ability to make people see beyond their own limited view. The galaxy was changing, and nobody understood how fast, except the humans.